schools, and they have these again. The whole of the curriculum revolves around topics, around learning expeditions, about going outside the school as an integral part of the classroom activity. Projects last 12 weeks. Students and teachers are working in interdisciplinary groups focusing on big questions. For example, what is the value of protest was a question that I saw being discussed. And producing materials, looking at case studies, looking at portfolios and so on. So over a period of 12 weeks, students work together across the curriculum in ways which generate challenging, interesting, high-quality outputs with children not particularly privileged in any way. It's an ordinary school from the ordinary part of the UK, and it is inspirational, and it shows you what can be done. In some of the work, the quality of work they produce, these are boards to put in a wildlife park to educate the public about these issues that children have been learning about. So it shows you this interaction between young people, schools, the local community, local government. It shows you what is possible. And it's not just about environmental topics, this is about social topics as well. So the whole of the curriculum from environment and beyond are covered in this whole school approach. Years ago, one of my earlier visits to China, we looked at green schools. It's a green school in Chongqing, I think. It's this impressive work going on all around us, which needs to be replicated and scaled up. Improving your school grounds, teachers need to know how to support young people in improving school grounds. School leaders need to be educated to see this as a priority, to realise that there are health and education benefits that come from engaging with the outdoors. This is one of the more recent times that Xiaomei and I visited Haidian Experimental School. It's a primary school. It's near a botanic garden, and the botanic garden has been supporting the school to radically improve their local environment. And they don't just have token efforts. Everything they do focuses around sustainability and improving the environment. So finally, not to forget the role of museums and science centres. Children visit museums and science centres infrequently, but what they have to offer is quite extraordinary. This is from Singapore. It's an exhibition about sustainability. It's hugely impressive. What you get in museums and science centres is a scale, a magnitude, a dynamism, the quality of their pedagogy. The inspirational exhibits they have are far more impressive than almost all schools can compete with. This guilt trip, where you go through this exhibition, you can see in the background, the guilt trip allows you to think about the decisions that you are making, to decide whether you want to walk to school or cycle or go by car. Each time you make a decision, you are scoring points. The more pro-sustainable your decision, the more points you score. And in the end, you get a sense of how sustainable your lifestyle is. A wonderful exhibit, and equally wonderful from Natural History Museum, Our Broken Planet, this award-winning project, was designed to give museum curators a chance to take one exhibit from their collection and to show why it's important, to show why this exhibit tells you something about climate change and about sustainability. It was one of the most unusual and challenging exhibits I've ever seen, and will be packaged and will be going on tour in the not too. But it wasn't just about exhibits, it was also about giving people an opportunity to ask questions, to make decisions, to commit to sustainable behaviours themselves. Not necessarily follow that through, but the exhibition was more than specimens. It was about values, it was about individual choice. The Oxford Museum of Natural History. If you want to be inspired about natural history and biology, this is one of the places to go. Schools cannot compete with the quality of exhibit. And what's happened over time is that museums have moved away from focusing on just presenting specimens, but to using those specimens to make people think about biodiversity loss, about the richness of life, about the ways in which humans have impacted on other animals, and think about ways in which they could make the world a better place. So we now have museums challenging people to take action for the future and to make a difference rather than just presenting the natural world as it is. The Eden Project, which has been around for a long time, different biospheres, with exhibits inside focusing on sustainability. That one of these, this is now going international, and there's one of these being developed, I think, in or near Shanghai. Finally, the IT, I talked about information technology, digital age, music. I've worked with Aquaria and schools and university departments in 3 countries, Denmark, Spain and England, where we develop materials using virtual reality to help people, young people in these different countries, to understand what's below the ocean surface, because ocean literacy is a key part of sustainability education, and this is an example of where children can become more ocean literate, because all of our life depends on the ocean in some way. How is our centre responding to all these challenges? So if you look on our website, you will see materials from a whole range of different subject areas, where we are trying to provide free professional development to all those teachers who are doing things themselves. We said before that teachers are self-educating, and we are producing free online material to support these modules across the whole range of different subjects. These are accessible to anyone. This is what they might look like, and we've already developed some, and more are in development as I speak. So that, I think, is that. What I wanted to do, I now have a little bit of time just to present something. I told you about that report, and the report was quite, about teachers' views, was quite dry and data-driven. I just wanted to just play a little bit of this podcast.
Today we're doing things a little differently. We're going to be looking at a really interesting survey about teachers in England and how they feel about teaching climate change and sustainability.
Really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about climate change on the show. But what about the people who are actually teaching the next generation about it?
Right. The ones shaping young minds.
Exactly. So we've got this awesome survey from UCL's Center for Climate Change and Sustainability Education. And it's really giving us like a raw, unfiltered look at what's going on in their heads.
It really is a unique data set.
Totally. And one of the first things that kind of jumped out at me was this stat about like teachers' beliefs about climate change.
Generated completely by artificial intelligence. I think it's quite extraordinary that I just fed the report into this app, and it generated a podcast with 2 people discussing the data. Boy, that's astonishing. That just gives you a sense of what is possible now, and just think what might happen in the next 5 or 10 years in terms of producing education materials that can take any document and turn it into a discussion between people. We're just scratching the surface. We just have to scratch harder. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting and inspiring lecture on a topic that I'm sure many of us are interested in for private reasons, but more hesitant about for professionally. So I was just curious about what will you propose to mathematics teachers in England. The background of this question for me is a thesis by Cécile Redondeau on environmental education in France, which is obligatory in all subjects, and where it also turned out, like in your statistics, that mathematics teachers were among those who found this the most difficult and challenging in a way.
Thank you, Carl. It is obviously easier in theory for science teachers and geography teachers to respond to environmental sustainability. But actually, as we were saying yesterday, every subject depends on mathematics in real life. So we have to find ways to produce materials. We have a team of maths education colleagues who are working on a module already to try and make it possible to do this. What would I say to maths teachers? Why would you listen to me? Listen to maths education specialists who are already doing work like this, I think. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for Justin, and thank you for AI and real people contribution to the talk. I think it's definitely very inspiring to think about everyone's facing the challenge of this environmental crisis, and our teachers are especially responsible to prepare for the future citizens into this world. So think about what can we do for our students and what can we do for our teachers as the future citizens. And so we're going to have a second professor to inspire us a bit more. Think about the competence of teachers in more broad way. So I'm going to introduce very briefly about our second professor first. So we have our second professor from Professor Vale from Spain, and he's the professor in European education and also a coordinator on the researching group on supranation policy of education and a member of Spanish Society of Comparative Education and many other abilities. His recent books are published on area of professional teaching competencies. So today, Professor Vale will present us a talk on model for teacher competencies evaluation.
So, good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to say thank you to all of you for listening to me this morning, and also thank you to the organizers. For me, it's a privilege to stay here. It's really an honor. So thank you very much, Dean, and thank you all the organizers team. And I would like to have an applause for all the technical staff and also all the team for this brilliant organization of this meeting. Thank you. CCA, for all of you. Okay. So it's very precious for me to talk after a native speaker. And I am the sandwich speaker this morning, so I'll try to do my best. Okay. I'm going to show you the 920 model as a framework of teacher professional competence, which is not my model, okay? It's from a team. Those are the name of the other partners, Lucía Sánchez Zarazaga, Jesus Manso, and all my researching group, which is the group of researching in supranational policies on education. So let's go to these 4 goals, okay? First of all, to share some sense about the question of professional teaching competences. Then I would like to show you very briefly some theoretical models of professional teaching competences, and also to give you some ideas about the supranational perspective, which is the field of my specialization. Then we land in the 920 model, and the name is because it has 20 competences for evaluating teachers and 9 scenarios. So the original idea is to organize the competences of teaching in scenarios in which we have gone. Okay? So let's go to the first part, the meaning of the question of professional teaching. As you know, teachers matter. OECD told us a long time ago, and they matter because they are the main part of the formal education. And formal education is a pillar of the welfare state. It's because it's a fundamental right, but it's also because it's a part of the human dignity, education. You know, I think that we don't have dignity because we've got fundamental rights. We've got fundamental rights because we have human dignity. So we need education as a part of the human dignity, and teachers are the main actors of this part of the human dignity. So we have to take care about that kind of profession. All the literature we have reviewed makes clear that the teachers are professionals. The question about if teaching is vocation, art, or science, I think it has no sense at all right now, because we have to look for the principles of a professional action, independent of the vocation, the art, the science. We have to evaluate the teaching performance, because education is a pillar of the welfare state and a part of the human dignity. But the problem is, what is that? What is a teaching performance? And how to evaluate it? That's the key. A lot of studies says that teacher quality means to have into account a lot of steps from the attracting teachers to the leadership development, including teacher initial training, professional training, and so on. Anyway, that's the question. What is a good teacher? Who is a very well qualified teacher? That's the question. We need, therefore, a framework of professional teaching competences. So let's see how is the issue about the two classical models of professional teaching competences. Traditionally, there are two models. The first one is the behaviorist. It means that the focus is in the functions or the actions of the teachers. And the other model is the psychologist, in which the focus is the personal abilities of the teacher, the emotions, and the attitudinal part of the teaching profession. We have the third way, which is the holistic one, which means that to be a teacher is mainly a professional performance. A professional performance means to have some competences. And we have to understand that a competence integrates knowledge, skills, and attitudes in the same way. So, the design of competency frameworks are not static, it's not universal, and not neutral. And it's in that way because it depends on a lot of factors that you have here. We don't have enough time to go through all of them, but it's very important to think about the purposes of education when we are thinking in the framework for competence teacher. We have to take into account the priorities and the political will, and also the status of the profession, among other factors. Then there is no single value framework. It's a social construction. It needs to be a consensus about that thing. A consensus that takes into account a lot of factors, socio-political dynamics, all the dimensions of the profession, the expected learning outcomes of students, and also the professional conditions. For that reason, some authors say that one of the most common criticisms of this framework is the risk of not being contextualized and of falling into simple standardization of the profession, ignoring its complexity. Look, I think that to have a valid framework of teaching competences is not only to have some standards of the profession. It's much more than that. And that's the complexity of the matter. That's the complexity of the topic. But we have the task to do it because it has a lot of benefits. It creates a shared discourse on the teaching profession. It involves all the key agents, all the educative community in the teacher's question. Also promote a defined image of the role of the teachers in society, enhancing teachers' professionalism, giving prestige to teaching work. Can be also a tool for self-evaluation and reflection of teaching practice. Of course, generate a professional development project and guide the design of policies related to the teacher. But be aware about a very important thing, and it's that professional competency frameworks alone do not necessarily improve the profession. So we need the framework, but not only the framework, We need also a global policy that addresses the teaching question. Okay? So let's see now the supranational perspective. Okay? What have we do in the supranational perspective? That's why my researching group is called Researching Group in Supranational Policies on Education. Because we have a look about all the documents of the international organizations. We think that they establish a kind of global policy in educational matters also. So how we can call national education, so global trends established by international organizations. Some of them are UNESCO, OECD, World Bank, European Union, and so on. So we can find some global trends about teacher profession. Let's see, all these documents at the end say more or less the same that are to sum up in the European education area. We have focused a lot in European education area. As far as you know, this means that by 2025, European Union tries that all European systems has some final competence for compulsory education and try to define a common framework for the teaching profession. Teachers training is one of the main pillars of European education area, and in this field they try to make European Innovative Teaching Award, or the Erasmus Teacher Academies, or they have a lot of inputs for the teaching profession and for prepared teachers, both in the initial training and in continuous training. So the conclusions in the supranational perspective are as follows. Teachers are a vital driving force for the learning process of the student in every educational system and play the most important role in making education a free-food experience. This has two senses. On one hand, it means that teachers are very important. I think are the most important. A good teacher. I mean, if you have a student that needs help, a good teacher can be the key for helping this student to be something someday. And a bad teacher, okay, a bad teacher can be the worst thing that can happen to your kids, to have a bad teacher. But on the other hand, it means that teachers has a lot of pressure in the educational system, and not only is the teacher the only responsible for what happened in education. So that sentence has a double sense. Is a risk also to think, okay, the teachers are the cornerstone on the educational system, but what happened with policies for teachers? So the framework should guide a teaching continuum, because that framework of teaching competences should combine knowledge, performance, and being. Let's see. Knowledge is crucial. We talked about that yesterday afternoon with Carl Wieslow. Teachers should mine his discipline, but also has to do pedagogical knowledge. Performance is very important in terms of functions, in terms of behaviors, in terms of modeling. They are modeled. But it's very important, it's in capital letters, being. UNESCO said in 1972, learning to be. So it's important also attitudes, principles, values. So it's a mixture of all of that, the things that we have to take into account when we are talking about a professional teaching competences framework. Those frameworks should guide evaluation and the teacher professional development. So let's see now the model 920. The model 920 is so called because we define 20 competences in 9 scenarios, as I told you previously. Okay. I told you the origin, the main concepts of the model. Also, I'll show you the instrument. I hope it works in the computer, and the possibilities and the impacts of the instrument, okay, if I have time. So let's see the origin. The origin is that we have a new way of addressing the teaching question, which is very holistic, and try to consider the paradigm of lifelong learning and apply that paradigm to the teaching question, to the teaching profession. Means lifelong teachers' education. Those are the two first books we wrote about that question. Teachers' question as a whole matter, because you know sometimes policies about teachers change a part of the profession, maybe salaries, maybe conditions, maybe other things, maybe initial training, but no, very frequently policies about teachers consider the teacher's question as a whole, you know? And then we apply the teacher question to the paradigm of lifelong teacher education. What does it mean? It means to take into account all the way of a career in teachers, okay? From the access to training to the lifelong learning career progression. And that includes a competence-based initial training for the performance of the profession. It means also that the internship and the selection for the profession, the induction and the management whole, you know, as a whole thing. The profession in different scenarios, that's the idea. So the model came up within the training work with teachers, with a lot of teachers, in practical sessions. An imposition of a government is not a policy in a lot of training work. So we have to say thank you to many teachers that have taken part in this kind of work sessions. You know? We made reports to the General Council of Teacher Professional Institutions, and we had a lot of researchers inside the research group, mainly doctoral theses about this topic. So then we finally put all together, and we wrap up everything, and we write this book, Professional Teaching Competences Framework. And I hope so. We are now trying to make the translation of this book into Chinese. So let's see if it's into Chinese. Not very late. So we have to take two elements mainly in the part of the theoretical part. How we conceive competence and the idea of the X scenarios, competences, indicators, and the scale. Well, a competence is not an ability, a competence is not a skill, a competence is just a performance that integrates knowledge, skills, and attitude at the same time, and combining them in a performance, which means solving a task in an appropriate way, okay? So, if this is a competence, the best way to see if a competence is in a teacher or not is looking for the X scenarios in which these performance are developed, okay? For that reason, we propose an instrument that specifies the different reality scenarios of the teacher's work, defining for each of these scenarios the most common performances, trying to establish the dimension of each of them so that they can be self-evaluated by the teachers. I have to emphasize that this selection of the scenarios and the selection of the competences has been a part of work with teachers. It has been bottom up, to emphasize this again. So we have 9 scenarios and 20 teacher competences. You can see a very picture of the model with the 9 scenarios and the 20 competences. As you can see, some of the scenarios has got only one competence, for example, myself, competence 1, but other scenarios like a classroom or a school has a lot of them, okay? Because some scenarios are more broader than others. Okay? So we have here all the scenarios, but I think it's better go directly to the questionnaire, to the instrument, in order to see that part more clearly. Okay, perfect. The technical part. Okay, next. So we have here the different scenarios in different colors, you know. And for each scenario, we define the competence, but the main idea is to transform the competence in a very clear indicator of the question, with a verb, an object, and a way to develop the performance implies the competence. So in the case of myself, the competence is the ethical commitment, the professional, personal commitment, and what does it mean? So it means to develop my teaching practice based on a deontological, ethical codes that lead me to reflect on the consequences of my actions within the framework of my teaching practice. So I think the main work has been to put this kind of level of the competence in a way that teachers can identify what that skill means, what performance it is. Okay? And then we have here the scale of performance from 0 to 5 in an European way, in the way of the European framework for languages, you know, E1, E2, B1, B2, C1, C2, 6. So you avoid a middle punctuation here, and you can make a low grade, a middle grade, and top grade, and also non-good grade and a good grade, okay? So we also have defined for each of the indicators, the book, the 3 dimensions of the competences. What knowledge are needed, what skills are needed for that, and what attitudes are needed for that. And we also show the lowest grade in the scale of performance and the top grade of performance. Okay? So, for example, this the second scenario is knowledge, and we have here mastery of the knowledge of my discipline, which is the top 2 competence. I master the knowledge related to the curriculum, but also the mastery of pedagogical knowledge, which means to be up to date in psychopedagogical elements, and also lifelong learning attitude, which means that I am continuously updating both to keep knowledge in my discipline and in pedagogical matters. Okay? Then we have the 3 scenario, which is the virtual space. We have to introduce the technological use, not only as a teacher, but also as a person who improves the digital competence in students. Okay? So we try to define the technological use as a competence as the regularity incorporating digital resources, blah, blah, blah. The classroom, we are thinking now in changing this name, maybe learning scenario or set learning set, something like that. This tool is continuously changing and improving. This scenario has 6 competences: teaching planning, management of learning experience, assessment of student progress, trying to distinguish evaluation and grading, because are different things to make how the learning is going to be and how the qualification is. So one thing is to evaluate, another different is grade, okay? Using different criteria and standards. Also to take care about the climate classroom, also the tutoring and guidance, and also to take into account the inclusion of the diversity. So this is the scenario, more complex maybe, with 6 competences, okay? All of them are also, or try to be, I don't know if they are, but they try to be as much clarified as possible with the indicators. Another scenario, which is, let's see, I lost the mouse. Here. 5 scenarios center. We have some competences here, like teamwork, pedagogical leadership, institutional participation, interpersonal relationship, and educational optimization. For example, when you look at institutional participation, it says, I get involved in the life of the school, I attend the meeting that are convened from different levels, and I participate in them constructively. So, as you see, the competence has always a verb, an object, and a way to do it in a proper way. Or I take advantage of different resources of the school, different from my classroom, such a library, dining room, playroom, with an educational sense, etc. Family is another scenario. I mean, not for universities, but this questionnaire is for non-tertiary schools. Family, relationship, I interact fluently and with the necessary assiduity with families, favoring an effective and enriching dialogue about the educational process of the children. And then we have 3 more, which means the contextual integration, the administrative responsibility, and also the global context, you know. The scenario 7 is the tech learning opportunities in the proximities of the school, in the context closest to the school. The 8th one is with the administration, and the 9th is with society, taking advantage of the theme of the social agenda. For example, the teachers, have you told us right now, are very good involved in this item, in these competences. But not all teachers are in the same grade involved. So it's for us also very important competence also. So this is the instrument. It's very, very simple, okay? But what is important is that this instrument needs some kind of training for explaining how each of the competences are working in a specific group, okay? So let's now see the next one, which is the possibilities of this model. So first of all, you can do this as a self-evaluation, as a perception, or you can graduate yourself in each of these competences. But you can also have a collegiate evaluation of faculty or center by aggregation. So we can have the mean for all of us, and we can have the mean of the competence in the center. But the interesting point is that not only you can have a mean for each of the indicators, but also for the cluster of the scenario. So you can have profiles, different centers in which different scenarios are working better than another. Also, it's very interesting, you can use it as a collegiate evaluation of the faculty by consensus dynamic, which is different, which is to have all the teaching team together, trying to decide what is the position of the team as a team in each of the competences. That kind of dynamics are very interesting because allow teachers to be in front of the mirror as a group, as a team that work together. Also can be used as a peer co-evaluation. I can see you in a class, you can see me in a class, you can make a questionnaire, and after that we can have a talk about your impression and mine, and in a kind of co-evaluation. Can be also applied by students. Why not? Why not have the students this questionnaire of each of the teachers? Also, the evaluation can be made for the management teams, or the inspection, or the educational administration. What kind of impacts we can have with this questionnaire, this model 920? At the micro level, we can have, first of all, the reflection on one's own practice. I mean, I am in front of the mirror. I have to make a reflection about my different scenarios of my profession. I am in front of a mirror of defining each of my tasks and the way of doing those tasks in a proper way, or in a way which is expected in the top grade of performance. But also it's very useful for improving dynamics of reflection as a team, okay? And it could be used also for the identification of training needs. What are the special competences in the team that are not in appropriate grade, so we have to improve that. Or establish training plans for a person, in a personal way, or for all the school, to design a teacher professional development according to the competence determination scenarios, or also, maybe, if you want, you can use it also for incentives based on performance. But it also has impacts at the macro level, because you can make updates of the initial training plans, you can assess and evaluate the profession as a global level, if you are the general administration of a region or of a country, of a county, of schools. You can also develop teacher professional development, make incentives, design global plans for communities, for the states. But capital letters is very important. We have two risks here. Okay? It's not a dramatic pause. That's because I was. But it's good in a dramatic way also, because we have two very important nuances. First of all, be careful with that kind of instrument. Be careful. Because we need a balance between a summative and a formative use. In the way we present this questionnaire and this model in our book, of course, we put the money on the summative form. No? We need to talk with the school before to use the questionnaire in order to explain the possibilities, in order to understand why they want to use the questionnaire, what for, okay? And then we can redefine the competence with the teacher's team, because different schools can have different ideas about the different scenarios and the competence related to. And also that means that in a summative way, this instrument can be a very good instrument to improve dynamics of reflection. And also, it's important to take into account that it's need to use another instrument, not only this quantitative instrument, but also interviews, reflective portfolio, and also contrast with colleagues, what are their impression about the marks that I get in this question, okay? So, that's more or less all. 10, 14, I have time for conclusions then. You want the conclusions? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Let's have the conclusions there, okay? First of all, this is a model proposal, okay? It's just a proposal. We are working on it. We are continually working on that. It's open, it's very open, because when we go to a school with this proposal, because they ask to us to develop this framework, we tell the school always the same. This is open. Try to adapt this questionnaire to your necessities, to your ideas, or to your purposes of the model, okay? It's also a proposal that needs debates and needs a lot of improvement, and I hope of you as much as improvement as possible, okay, to this model. But it has some strengths. For example, the mode of creation, bottom-up methodology, make us very confident about these 20 competences are felt by the teachers as the ones more common competences needed. Okay? The teachers are the protagonists all over the time, not only when we are creating the model, but also when we use the model in the schools. So we are not the protagonist. The questionnaire is not the protagonist. The protagonist is the teacher in front of the questionnaire, having reflections. Okay? It's a competence-based approach in accordance with the postulates of international organizations, and it's very easy and very fast. When you have the enough training, then you can fill in the questionnaire just in, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes. It depends on the kind of process you want to use with it. Okay? But it needs training, conviction, and appropriation, which means also for a school to have to be willing to have this kind of process of reflection, which is also good. Okay. It has also weaknesses, of course. For example, need to adapt to different contexts. It's not universal, of course. We have to make more precise in the development of the level of mastery of each of the competences. You know, the grade, the scale grade. But this is a work with the schools also, which is very interesting, because before you use the questionnaire, in the session with the schools, we graduate the different levels. Okay? It has a lot of opportunities. It's a framework for discussion. It is very versatile. It can be used in a different concentric level, a personal level, school level, county level, region level. It can be used for purposes of different nature, just to identify necessities or just for evaluation. And at the end, the threat. You have to understand the model well. It's not a quantitative model. It's a reflexive model. It's just an invitation to reflect about 20 performances in teaching. Requires training, that's true, but you need also a shift in the paradigm, in the competential paradigm, and the most risky thing is the unintended use. Of course, it's always the same. Rankings, unwanted competition between teachers or between schools, or but anyway, the teaching question could be, is teaching question an eternal zombie policy? It's a policy that's always in the agenda, but it's dead because it's not really taking it seriously. So let's see, finish with the references, and we have 2-3 minutes for discussion. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm sorry if I have been in a hurry, but I wanted to finish on time. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm sure I have many questions about, because this framework, the model, is so related to our work and research. So we take some questions from the audience.
Thank you for the energetic presentation. I learned so much. I was wondering, because you are talking about this instrument that is basically survey for teachers, and as you probably aware, social desirability is always a key threat in I guess ascertaining the validity in teacher responses, because teachers and parents are two groups that are well known for social desirability in their answers now. So I was really glad to see your triangulation efforts in terms of, like interviews, the additional use of interviews, portfolios, as well as the use of student assessment, and you also mentioned the peer co-evaluation. So I was really glad to see those efforts, and then that led me to the second question. What if there's a gap between the teacher's report and student report? In other words, a lot of times students do not. So a lot of times there's a gap between what teachers are saying they're doing and what teachers perceive that their teachers are doing. So when you have those gaps, what do you do? I mean, which one should be considered more important and more consequential in student learning, for example? That's my second question.
First of all, for us, it's much more important the content validity than the statistical validity, So we trust a lot in the way we have created the questionnaire, and that the teachers feel confident about that kind of questionnaire, more than the statistical validation. Nevertheless, we have made statistic validation, and it works. That's the good news. But we are improving the statistical validation at the same time that we are using more and more the questionnaire with teachers. Okay. Second question. This is a young model. Okay. So not all the possibilities have been explored yet. For example, the one of contrasting teachers and student questions. We don't have that experience yet. So I can answer your question. But anyway, that question can be answered in the same sense than, for example, in the university. At the beginning, decades ago, when the universities began to make questionnaires to the students about us as university teachers, it was everybody was terrified. Oh, a student is nothing to evaluate me as a university professor. With the time, we are used to that. It can be gaps, but the gaps are part of the life in the evaluation. So let's see how this works in this case with this model when we try to make this contrast. But we don't have data right now about that. But it's a very interesting question. Thank you. I don't know if we have time to question.
Sorry, don't really have time, but thank you so much for
We have
Professor.
the break.
We're definitely going to continue these discussions during break and on lunchtime.
Thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot. So we do really have a very tight schedule, so we can't wait to welcome our second guest, which is Professor Gabriel from University of Hamburg. Gabriel is a senior professor in mathematics education since 1998, and she served the editor-in-chief of ZDM Mathematics Education, and her research area covers empirical studies of teacher education and teachers' professionalism, and modeling and applications in schools, international comparative studies, gender and cultural aspects in mathematics education. So today, Gabriel will give us a talk on the discourse on mathematics teachers' competence and its relation to instructional quality. Please welcome, Gabriel.
Di luar itu di gerbang tolong ya.
Oh iya ya.
Yes.
Thank you very much for inviting me here in this prestigious university and give me the chance to present, the work we have done in the current two decades on mathematics teachers' professional competence. And it relates very nicely to the talk. Not okay? No, better? It relates very nicely and complements very nicely the talk we have just heard by Professor Weyer. And of course, it's strongly related to what we have heard yesterday from Professor Winslow. And yesterday I was asked why I have put mathematics in brackets. And it's a very easy explanation. The work I will present empirical research we have done in the last 2 decades, I already mentioned that. We have done that in the area of mathematics teacher education and in mathematics education. But the results are not only related to mathematics teacher education and teacher professional development, they have a strong general core. Therefore, the brackets. I have, like all the other speakers, I have a tough schedule, so I will introduce the current discourse on teachers' competencies coming from a subject-related perspective. I will then distinguish cognitive and situated approaches on teacher competencies, having Yes, but the construct of teacher competencies is very strongly related to what we have just heard, but with a few other nuances. And I will use examples from the TEDS research program, the program I have worked with in the last 2 decades. Then I will talk about instruction quality and its relation to professional teacher noticing. And I will then close with the evaluation of the impact chain of teachers' competence and students' learning progress. Because we have heard it yesterday by Professor Winslow, the question how strongly teachers' competence is impacting students' learning progress is actually the ultimate goal of teacher education and of all teaching. So I will briefly introduce the current discourse on teachers' competencies. And as I said, I'm coming from mathematics, from subject-related didactics, so my perspective is a little bit different from what we have just heard. So if we look at the discourse in the last 20 to 30 years, we have a growing number of empirical studies on teacher education, and most of them focus on teachers' competencies. And these studies have actually taken up this construct of competencies from international comparative studies on students' achievements, namely PISA, mainly PISA. And here teacher knowledge is actually the central construct. And I would like to very briefly refer to Schulman's description of pedagogical content knowledge, which he already developed in 1987. And the studies I'm going to describe have as common core this description of pedagogical content knowledge, which Schulman has described. And I bring this very famous quote, I guess everybody working in this area knows it by heart, as a special amalgam of content and pedagogy that is uniquely the province of teachers, their own special form of professional understanding. So here the professionalization, the construct of professional, teacher as professional, comes in. However, although we are all referring, or most of these empirical studies are referring to Schulman, there is no general consensus on the facets of this concept. And there is a very nice survey by De Pepe, Verschaffel and Kelchtermans already in 2013, in which they clarified that very clearly, and unfortunately it still holds until today. And referring to the very important work by Rowland and Ruthven, we can distinguish 2 different paradigms how to conceptualize pedagogical content knowledge. And they both write, and I quote them, whether mathematical knowledge in teaching is located in the head of the individual teacher, or is somehow a social asset, meaningful only in the context of its application. So these are the 2 very strong and different paradigms, and I will actually try to explain, or to actually try to show how you can integrate these 2 different paradigms. But if we look at these different paradigms, this has strong consequences, because you distinguish a cognitive and a situated perspective on pedagogical content knowledge. And De Pepe and others describe this first as a cognitive perspective. That means you identify a limited number of components which are part of pedagogical content knowledge, and then you distinguish pedagogical content knowledge from other categories of teachers' knowledge base. So these are the common models we have in teacher competence. And we have, on the other side, we have a situated perspective in which pedagogical content knowledge is described as multidimensional. Teachers' choices simultaneously reflect mathematical and pedagogical deliberations. And De Pepe and others describe and point out very clearly that both perspectives are needed, because both perspectives, and I mean it is very clear, both perspectives have pitfalls and shortcomings as well as strengths. So in the following, I would like to describe these 2 different perspectives and how I think they can be integrated. So first, I now describe a cognitive and this cognitive and situated approach on teachers' competence, and I give examples from the TEDS research program. That's actually a research program in which I'm working. Yes, I have worked in the last decades. So the theoretical starting point, and I've already mentioned that, is teachers' competencies. And this competence construct goes in this specific discourse refers to the psychologist, the German psychologist Weinert, who divided competence in cognitive facets, and we have already heard that by the talk by Professor Wehr. So this is teachers' professional knowledge, and the affective motivational facets, namely mainly professional beliefs. And if we further continue, we can differentiate, referring to Schurman, the professional knowledge of teachers into three different facets. And this holds for many other subjects as well, and is not specific only to mathematics. So we first have the mathematics content knowledge, the MCK, of which we have heard yesterday by Professor Winslow. Then we have mathematics pedagogical content knowledge, MPCK, which includes curricular knowledge as well, and that was mentioned yesterday by Professor Winslow as well. And then we have general pedagogical knowledge, because we have to embed our teaching in general pedagogical elaborations. And in addition, we have professional beliefs. Especially important has been in the last few years epistemological beliefs about the nature of mathematics, and here you can replace it by many other subjects, and the beliefs about the teaching and learning of mathematics. So, and I've brought with me very, very quickly a few seminal theoretical approaches. One very famous one is the Knowledge Quartet by Roland and others. You have the foundation of mathematical knowledge, and then you have knowledge in action, where here actually really in connection with teaching, the mathematical knowledge is transformed into pedagogical knowledge. And the teaching actions, which are contingent, are playing an extremely important role. Another very famous and quite old theoretical framework is the theoretical framework by Fennemer and Franke, already in 1992 developed, and they put actually content-specific knowledge in the middle, but then surrounded by knowledge of mathematics, pedagogical knowledge, and then the knowledge of learners' cognitions in mathematics, complemented by beliefs. And you probably have all seen this very important theoretical framework developed by Löwenberg-Ball, Hill and Bass and many others within the framework of the Mathematical Knowledge for Teaching project. And here you see on the left-hand side subject matter knowledge differentiated in three different facets, like common content knowledge, horizon content knowledge, and then on the other side, the pedagogical content knowledge, which is then differentiated concerning knowledge of content and teaching, of curriculum, and so on. And I would now like to refer, because the empirical study I'm going to describe is actually an empirical study which was carried out in an international comparative study, the Teacher Education and Development Study, Learning to Teach Mathematics, the so-called TEDS-M study, which was carried out under the auspices of the International Association for the Evaluation of Educational Achievement, briefly IEA. And that was already carried out in 2008, and the results were published in 2010. And here we actually carried out an empirical study with pre-service teacher at the end of teacher education. And we had two different kinds of studies, one focusing on primary teachers and one focusing on secondary teachers. 16 or sometimes we count 17 countries from East and from West has participated. And these pre-service teachers were at the end of teacher education. And what makes this study so remarkable is that it used now nationally representative samples. And whoever has tried to use representative samples know that it is actually a nightmare, because in Germany we have 16 federal states all had to agree. It was something I really would not like to repeat in my life. So, yes, but it of course brings in really very strong results because these are representative samples. So we used at this time paper and pencil tests. We have later on then actually put that into internet-based tests, and we used a variety of open and closed items and items with short answers. And the model we have developed, the competence model we have developed within this framework, is very similar to what we have heard, but has some significant differences from the model by Professor Weyrl because it is subject related. So we have on the left-hand side the cognitive abilities of the teachers, on the right-hand side the affective motivational characteristics, including beliefs, motivation, self-regulation, and then we have actually the distinction content knowledge, pedagogical content knowledge, general pedagogical knowledge. And you see that this model is not restricted to mathematics. We can, of course, use it for many other school subjects as well. We have this further differentiated within the TEDS-M study because it was about mathematics. So we actually then included different mathematical areas and differentiated the mathematics pedagogical content knowledge further on. And very quickly, what you get as a result, very easily from this from these kind of studies, you have a league table, in which you actually order the results concerning regions and means. So the international mean was 500, and you can see that one East Asian country or one East Asian region, namely Taiwan, outperformed all the other countries by far, and you see that only one African and one South American country participated. And you see that the ranking is a little bit different when it comes to pedagogical content knowledge, but you see that actually the East Asian countries are outperforming all the other regions. So, but of course, this gives you one insight, but of course the question arises afterwards, how can we, with professional competence, how can we analyze professional competence in a more performance-oriented way? That was what we have just heard. How can we can come closer to what is really going on in the classrooms with students learning? And here is the situated perspective with situation-specific skills. We have already heard about skills have come in. And I have brought with me the seminal model developed by Blömecke, Gustafsson, and Chambers in 2015, and it really has shaped discourse very strongly, and you see very strongly related to what we have heard. On the left-hand side, the dispositions, cognition, affect, and motivation. On the right-hand side, performance. And then you have the skills in between, namely in this model described as perception, interpretation, and decision-making. And we have in our own work this situation-specific skills further differentiated, and we have connected ourselves to the concept of noticing. The discourse on a teacher's professional noticing has actually been discussed and developed strongly in the last, we can say last 20 years. And here you have conceptualization of these three facets of teacher noticing. So nearly all researchers describe noticing as attending to particular events in an instructional setting, then making sense of events in an instructional setting. And then you have, for teachers, different activity-oriented facets, decision-making, deciding how to respond or shaping, and then enactment, which is something even between teaching, between decision making and then really implementing it. And we have in our own research program distinguished the following three facets of teacher professional noticing, namely perceiving particular events in an instructional setting. So teachers have to perceive something, which is important. They have to interpret it, and then they have to make a decision, either as anticipating responses to student activities or as proposing alternative instructional strategies. So we described it like that. Do you see that we are coming much closer to teaching as we are with the original description? We have, and I will only quickly describe that we have developed a very broad understanding of teachers noticing, including many aspects of already quality-oriented mathematics teaching, which then leads to the second topic of my talk, namely instruction quality. So classroom management, potential for cognitive activation of students plays an important role. And we have used this model within the TATS research program, with which are actually results of this I will end. And further, maybe important, we have developed 3 video vignettes in a TATS follow-up study, 3 video vignettes for primary education, 3 for secondary mathematics teacher education, in which we try to measure teachers noticing. And these video vignettes are very close to mathematics lessons. They try to cover a whole lesson, but only in a few minutes, and they are used scripted plots. I'm happy to elaborate later on. So now, instruction quality and its relation to noticing. One would expect, because teacher noticing is so strongly connected to teaching, that there are many studies around connected to instruction quality, but it is interesting that there are hardly any studies about noticing and instruction quality. There are a few studies carried out in the context of the TIMSS video study, which was already carried out in 1998 and 1999, and several follow-up studies, especially the German Swiss Pythagoras study. And in this study, a very interesting generic definition of instruction quality was developed, namely the 3 basic dimensions on instruction quality. And 3 categories were distinguished: efficient classroom management, it means optimal time of learning, optimal usage of learning time; cognitive activation, the potential for challenging students to engage in complex thought processes; and constructive support, that means the supportive learning environment by the teachers. And these 3 dimensions can be measured by generic instruments, and you probably have all heard about this very famous classroom assessment scoring system, the so-called CLASS instrument, which allows to measure these 3 dimensions. But many math educators especially were not very happy with these very generic definitions. So within the context of the MQI project, especially the Learning Mathematics for Teaching project, run by Deborah Löwenberg-Ball together with Heather Hill and others, they developed another instrument, the mathematical quality of instruction, in which, for example, the richness of mathematics is included, or working with students and mathematics as a dimension is included. There are hybrid conceptualizations, and the most famous one, I would say, is the one by Alan Schoenfeld, developed the true math instrument from the Teaching for Robust Understanding project. And here he included content, cognitive demand, but agency and authority and identity as well. So these kind of instruments are around. And if you look at the results of empirical study, because, I mean, there are very clear conceptualizations of instruction quality and instruments around, one would expect many studies on instruction quality and teacher noticing, but it is interesting that there are only a few studies studies around. And, for example, one in which it is, there are indicators pointed out for close interrelation between teacher noticing and instruction quality, and with increasing teaching experience, this is strengthened. So here, teacher expertise comes in, although teacher expertise is only in part related to the length of teaching experience. We know that other facets of teacher knowledge and teacher noticing have influence on instruction quality, especially cognitive activation is strongly connected to mathematics pedagogical facets of situation-specific skills. That's a very important result within the context of the coactive study. And we know that, for example, beliefs play a very important role. So we have, in order to come still closer to what was our goal in the TEDS research program, we have developed an instrument for instruction quality, a hybrid instrument in which we adapted the three basic dimensions from the, actually from Marcuse and Pauli within the Pythagoras study. And we developed dimensions for math didactic quality, and you see it over there. We have a subject-specific dimension like mathematical correctness, subject-specific depth, and instruction-specific dimension like variety of representations. And what makes our instrument a little bit different from others is that we did live rating, which is disturbing teaching less than videotaping. So I now come to the last part, namely the ultimate goal of actually teaching, namely the relation between teachers' competencies and students' learning progress as the ultimate goal of teaching. And I would like to start with this very general model, which we have developed. I have developed with my colleague Johannes König and further developed with my colleague Himon Yang. And on the left-hand side, you see teacher education, teacher professional development programs. You see characteristics of the institutions. You see the entry dispositions, and of course, opportunities to learn. No, yes, that's functioning now. Okay, then let's do it like that. So then we have the professional competence of teachers, the dispositional aspect, and situation-specific aspect, that means noticing, and we have the performance, that means the teaching practice and instruction quality. And we have the student learning outcomes, that means the mathematical achievement in our case, but of course you can always replace it by other subjects, and the effective learning outcomes. And I have already made several arrows, and of course the question is, how are these different columns influencing each other? So what we did within the TEDS research program, we implemented two studies with in-service teachers, actually in 3 federal states of Germany, and with actually 280.
Thank you.